Good day and welcome to the Protected by Purpose podcast. This is your host, Dorinda Walker. So, welcome everybody on Facebook. I'm glad to have you join us. I am fortunate to have the incredibly beautiful and talented Nicole Martine Hall.
Oh,
welcome.
Thank you so much, Dorinda. I'm so happy to be here. This is awesome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So, when I decided to have this podcast, I knew I had to have you on. Because when we talked about my book and my story and the way we relate, based on our experience, I said I have to have Nicole on so we can share that you don't have to be a victim of your circumstance, that you can go on and live and lead a successful life.
Yes.
And so you are the epitome of that. So tell us all about Nicole now, who you are, what you do. And then tell us about 18-year-old Nicole and what obstacles you faced in pursuing your goals.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for the welcome. I'm so happy to be here, Protected by Purpose. So who I am now, I am a single black female, 48 years old, and I currently reside in New Jersey. I work in advertising. I've been working in advertising for about 20 plus years, and my profession is human resources. I've actually kind of fell into the field because I was working, when I first was coming up, I was working at a mom and pop collection agency, and it was close by a college that I applied to, which was Baruch College, and I got in. So I've been in advertising ever since, and the 18-year-old Nicole, she had aspirations just to get out of the hood. And that was it, really, at that time. I really didn't know who I was as a young person, and I was just developing a little bit about myself in terms of character, integrity, and all of those life lessons my grandmother left with me before she passed on.
So Nicole is being modest. Her title is SVP, okay? And so she has a lot of responsibility in her role, and is a woman of power and leadership.
Okay.
And so I just want to give you kudos for that.
Well, thank you.
So tell us about growing up in the hood and what it was like.
Well, what I will say is that you definitely had to know who you were at your core. So growing up in Far Rockaway Queens, shout out to Far Rockaway, Red Front Housing, I was a little girl who just had aspirations to, at the time, I think, just really wanted to see what was on the outside of the bricks. And what I mean by that, the brick walls, the stairwells, etc. So a lot of times what I did was I kind of went into my fairy tale world in my mind, and I was an actress. I was someone who wanted to make people laugh. I wanted someone to make people feel a certain thing, whether it be something serious or not. So I always was the type that was in front of people doing storytelling contests or, reciting poems and things of that sort. My aunt at the time, who, my grandmother couldn't run me around because she was a little bit older. So my aunt, what she did was she would really run me on these like go-sees. So all of these different contests where I would have to perform or do some sort of act that I practice at home. So that's who I was as a little girl, and then what I did was I took that and parlayed that into me really stepping out and really wanted to discover what was outside of Far Rockaway, the A train, which is the last stop on the A train. So I then ventured off and got a job very young, did some things that I probably wouldn't be so proud of now, but I'm actually happy I did them, as far as in being able to work at a young age. And really, I think it was for me just really trying to find myself, looking for and out and finding people that just weren't like me.
So we met, and we spent, I think for the first time, we spent time together in 2013 at MegaFest. I think that was the first time we really hung out and spent time. So we had a lot of fun. Lemon Drop Martinis with Michelle Thornton G, who will be on the show and hopefully in September, October, who's a good friend of both of us.
Yes. MTG, shout out to you.
And we just had a blast. And Coco was part of my singing group because for those of you who do not know, I
forgot about that.
yeah, I can sing in my head.
I forgot about that.
And so we just had so much fun that day. But what I loved about you instantly is I could tell that you had a very giving spirit.
And I sound like my grandmother now.
Yeah. I could tell that instantly that that you were a giver. One of the things that I struggled with coming up, because I grew up, you know my story, I grew up with two parents who were addicted, and I was shuffled from relative to relative and cared for by both my maternal and paternal grandparents, and I had low self-esteem. So one of the things coming out of that experience was me wanting to be a pleaser. And do you think that part of that comes from that experience of being around addiction and struggle growing up in the hood? Do you think that's an outcome?
Well, I was coined Miss Congeniality by several friends. What I will say is that I wanted people to like me, but I think some of the lessons, and I'll just drop one. I know you had told me to think about some of the life lessons that I've had, and one of the ones I would share with my grandmother always told me was never like or love nobody no more than they do you. And I really kept that at the forefront of my mind. I did want to help people, and I have a lot of empathy for people. I have a lot of compassion for people. But when it comes at the expense of me giving up all of my sanity and my peace, then I knew I had to cut it off. So once I realized, like, if, say for instance, if you pet a dog and you keep petting a dog, like Pavlov's theory, you keep petting and you condition things. So if you keep petting the dog and if he starts, he keeps wanting to bite you, you eventually will stop. So I think in my way of coming up and really trying to realize who was around me, I could lead them to the water, but I could not allow them to drink from the well. They had to learn how to drink from the well themselves. So I would try so many times, and then I would be like, you know what? I got to let God do his job, because I cannot fill those shoes. So I think I learned earlier on, based on my grandmother's nuggets of wisdom she gave me, is just you got to back off sometimes, because sometimes you're doing too much.
Yeah. Another thing I learned is that as you're on your own journey to success, not everybody can come along with you, and that includes family. So did you have any tension with letting go and moving on, particularly from family who might not have understood your desire for the type of success that you have now?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think that one of the things that I family is family. You're gonna fight, you're gonna love, you're gonna cast out, whatever. But what I learned is that sometimes it will take others a little bit longer to get the lesson. And in my situation growing up, I grew up in primarily a drug addicted family. And when I looked up and looked out, I was like, this is not normal. And I can say that today and say it with confidence, because I think all of my family members can attest to me really trying to help them or provide them with some sort of resources and really opening the door, just really trying to be there for them in terms of that support. But I think it comes to a point where you become an enabler. And in becoming an enabler, you have to then look at your psyche and your situation and where you are physiologically and say, am I doing too much? And so I think it takes a little bit of the harder lesson to really step back and see that you might be depriving yourself from peace, happiness, just joy, because you're constantly trying to help somebody who is not ready. And when they're not ready, they're just not ready, and they may come around and it may take a while. I felt like I needed to go to a program like they have the AA. I needed to go to therapy for myself, because it was hurting me more so when I was reaching out to help some of my family members who just couldn't help themselves. And I'm proud to say today, praise report, most of the people who I've reached out and helped, they finally got themselves together, but it took years. And so when you're in that environment, it's hard to decipher, and that's when you really have to lean in on the Lord. And I mean, really, I didn't know who Jesus was back then. It was my grandmother's Jesus, baby Jesus, but I adopted it for myself, and I've learned to really you have to pray, and you have to be steadfast in that prayer, and sometimes stepping away and praying for people is the best thing you can do for them.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing I do know about addiction is you cannot help an addict until they want to help themselves. And I learned that with both my parents. My mom died a heroin addict, even though she was a functional addict, but she was still an addict. I'm going to read this because people ask me all the time about this Dear Reader section in my book on page 25, and then we're going to talk about it.
Okay.
So it says, in assessing my Aunt Mary's life experience, I learned a valuable coping skill. Sometimes you must love people from a distance, a requirement to maintain your own sanity. If you consume your life trying to help people who don't want to help themselves, they will bring you down and stop you from fulfilling your life's purpose. I have committed to never babysit grown folks who know better and yet choose not to do better for themselves. That is not to say that they don't deserve love and support, but there must be boundaries on what you will tolerate. If you are unwavering in upholding standards in your life, people will learn to honor and respect your boundaries. And there's more to it, but
so true.
Yeah. So that was people. Every time I do a book event, people are like, please read page 25 because I guess it resonates with so many people, and some people struggle with the guilt. Yeah. And what I know is that not everybody is meant to go on your journey, so you can't feel guilty, and you can only do what you can do for your own peace of mind.
So true.
Yeah. Well, when did you realize that addiction wasn't normal?
I think, to be honest with you, I think at the age of like 5 or 6, you just knew it wasn't normal. I grew up in a time and an era where it was like everybody was nodding out. Everybody was running or drinking and all of that stuff. That was just what I was around. Now, I didn't try anything or wasn't exposed to it. My grandmother did a great job with protecting me from it, and she showered me with love. But I think that when you grow up in the ilk of just being in that era and it's surrounded by you, you have to realize that it just wasn't normal. And I think what really made me escape again was the drama, my imaginary friends in my head, but also too was like taking a walk from the hood or from your neighborhood, going someplace else, getting on a bus and going to the other town where the quote unquote rich people live. So I did a lot of that. I did a lot of exploring, and I was always curious as a kid. So I just knew that there was something across the other side of the water. I used to always think about like my because I used to read a lot of like poems like Harriet Tubman. I used to read a lot of Langston Hughes, and just try to like put in my mind like what would some of our forefathers would be thinking about and doing. And I was like, there's something on the other side of the water. There's got to be. And I never forget, there was this one time I had time management issues. I still have them today. Come on now. And I remember I had to catch this train, because if I didn't catch this train, I was going to be late. So I was running. I like threw myself together. I was running to catch the A train. And I never forget, one of my neighbors at the time, she said to me, why are you running? Why are you running to catch that train? I said, because I got to get out. And that was my gateway. I just was not accepting that my situation was what it was. Now, I'm not saying that I grew up and it was horrible, but I did see, and it was exposed to too much as a young kid, I think. I learned to garner all of that, and I think a lot of times people thought it was just the norm. But I just knew I had to run.
Yeah, and the same with me. I mean, my life wasn't horrific. I still had loving family around. We're the same age. And so I remember the 70s vividly because our neighborhoods were flooded with heroin.
Yeah, and the crack cocaine. It was just really bad.
It was just, it went from heroin. When heroin couldn't destroy the black family, they, flooded our neighborhoods with crack, and that was it.
And I mean, unfortunately, a lot of victims, in my family, a lot of them fell victim to it. It's unfortunate. They was just experimenting and trying it, and then next thing you know, one thing led to another. Either they got, they stayed on it, they couldn't get off of it. A lot of them died, and and I just learned how to like look past that, and obviously love them when they was here, but you got to look beyond that. at least try to live a life where you know that it doesn't have to involve all of that all the time. Yeah.
And I like that you said you used your imagination and creativity to block all that out.
Yeah.
I think a lot of my character was shaped by those experiences because I used, you know, my imagination, my creativity. I love to read. Judy Blume was my favorite author.
Oh my God, yeah.
When I was
Blubber?
Yeah.
She got her thing? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I used that to try to escape. And, you know, I had cousins and stuff that, you know, we hung out and kept me busy.
Yeah. But
I always had this desire and I guess inner knowledge that there was something more,
of course,
to this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what would you say to a young woman today who may be in an unfortunate circumstance around addiction, around poverty, growing up in a bad neighborhood? What advice would you give to that young girl?
Well, I would say to her, definitely if there's someone she can talk to that she knows she can trust, where she could just really be her authentic self, just talk to them. So I was much younger than most of my friends. So most of my friends were either 4 or 5 years older than me. I think I just had like an old soul. So I used to share a lot of my innermost like secrets and, you know, things of that sort with them about my aspirations. So I would talk to them. Find somebody in your family. I've always had role models in my family. My aunt was a role model in my family. She still is. And then there are some people on my grandmother's side. So I wasn't raised by my mother and my father. My mother died very young, but she died from cancer. And my father I never knew until I got in my mid to late 30s. I hired a detective to find out who he was and was joined to meet him. So I didn't have him to go to. So I had cousins. I had my first cousins. And I had my aunt, and I had some of my older girlfriends in the neighborhood who would take me under their wing because I think I just came across as being a little bit older than the average 13 or 12-year-old.
Yeah.
So I think that she needs to find someone she can talk to, even also in school. I always attach myself to the counselors. So any counselor who can see my colorful spirit and wouldn't judge me or just would kind of like really listen and lean in, I would talk to them as well. And at the time, that's all I really had. And I had a couple of friends in the neighborhood as well. I had girlfriends in the neighborhood, but I think that she should probably like look for her family first, and then outside of that, maybe somebody in school or even church.
That's good advice.
Yeah.
I'm interested in knowing what was the impetus behind you wanting to seek out your dad, and how was that experience when you first met?
Wow. Well, that is deep. But I'll keep it short. So I just always had it in my gut as a little girl. I just always said a prayer. I just want to know who my dad was. And so coming up, you know, you have all of the kids who may have Father's Day or all of these different holidays. And I just never had that figure in my life. And I find that as I was going deeper, trying to learn a little bit more about who I was at becoming a woman, in terms of the men I date, I wanted to know if there was some sort of correlation. It was just one of those things whereby I said, I need to know, and I just don't want it to be like an afterthought. I want to know if my dad is still living, do I have siblings, etc. So I was in church one day. My pastor was going on talking about his relationship that he had with his dad, who he found not so far off. So I said, okay, cool. Let me talk to pastor, and then next thing you know, fast forward, I was introduced to the detective, and the detective asked me a couple of questions. I knew what my aunt told me and my grandmother told me at the time when she was living, and we kind of like went off of that. And next thing you know, the detective came back, and he was like, his name was Willie. He was like, Nicole, I think I've identified him. I said, what? And he was like, yeah, and he's 15 minutes from you. I said, what? Wow. And what really made me want to look for him was I was single, and I didn't want to date my brother or my father, okay, because I don't look too bad. And B, it was just more so like filling that void. I just want to know who my dad was. And so Willie had reached out to him, did some sort of connection. They had a conversation, and you know, we went and we staked out by the house. It was a whole big thing. But all I could say is when I met him, we met on Flatbush Avenue. I walked in his diner, and I looked at this man, And I said, oh my God, this is my father. Because I got like this big head like him, you know, like these big cheeks and this big head. And I sat down, and the first thing I wanted to know was where he was from, because I heard different things. I mean, all along coming up, I thought I was full-blood Jamaican. And so when I sat down, and because he has an accent, and I said, well, he had an accent. I said, well, where are you from? He said, Panama. I said, Panama? I said, hola, ¿cómo estás, mi amigo? And this was 37, and he was like in shock, because I guess he was wondering why I wasn't upset, why I wasn't calling him a deadbeat dad. But I was thinking to myself, well, this is my father, and you know what? God made this happen. He made one of my dreams come true. Wow, there is a God. Mm-hmm. And so I just started talking to him, and then my phone was blowing up, and then all I know, I had to pick up the phone because I'm a clown. So I picked up the phone. I said, stand down, stand down. You know, he's not trying to get rid of the evidence. It's okay, back off, you know. And he just wanted to talk. It was awesome, but I said to him, before we move forward and I give you all of this, I said, because it's contagious, you're going to want to come back. Mm-hmm. And I said, I just need to take a paternity test. I want to make sure that this is what it is. And so I set it up. We went to 2 separate companies. We did the swab, came back, found out that that was my father. He lived 15 minutes away from me this whole time. Oh, wow. From that union of him and my mom, what he has a son and a daughter, and my half brother and sister. My half brother and I were born on the same exact day. Wow. 5 years apart, which was really eerie. And my half sister, the company that I was working at, she just left working from. Oh my goodness. So it was crazy, right? And so it was just awesome. I had to stop and think about it, because I took my father to church. And I was going to church at the Emmanuel Baptist Church. Shout out to my Reverend Trufant. He's awesome. The whole EBC family is awesome. I had taken my father to church, and he had not been in a church in almost 40 years since he came to this country. He was so nervous, and I'm like, dude, are you like, what's going on? Like, is the house gonna burn down when you walk through? But he was just like rocking, shaking, like almost, and I just was like, it's okay. You know, you're good. It's good. And he died 6 months after I met him. Wow. Yep, he died. And I actually said to him as we were walking into church, I said, I hear some wheezing. So you need to get that checked out. So, you know, me as his daughter, I wasn't like I didn't know him. I couldn't really call him daddy. Mm-hmm. He was known to me as Harvey, you know, and he didn't raise me. And then, you know, he just was like, what do you mean? You said you just walked too fast. I said, nah, something's up. And lo and behold, he had like fluid on his lungs. He didn't realize, stubborn. Black man don't want to go to the hospital, or the doctor to get checked out. He had fluid on his lungs, and lo and behold, he had an embolism where it just, you know, he had a massive heart attack. Wow. And I didn't get to see him in the hospital. So I feel like, you know, for me, there was closure. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful experience for me to know who he was. Truly a gift from God. Oh yeah, definitely, without a doubt, a doubt. And you know, it just made me think and believe, and you know, in prayer. And you know, you gotta be steadfast with it, and you gotta like just be deliberate and intentional with how you show up, and what do you want to see in your life? What do you want to see unfold? Yeah. All right. So anybody out there who wants to know who one of their parents are, get you a private detective and try to go find them. And now we have Ancestry, so we can connect DNA and all that kind of stuff. It's amazing what you can do with technology and a detective. But it's a beautiful story. So thank you for sharing that with the listeners. I know that we inspired or are going to inspire and encourage someone who's struggling. So we talked a lot about the sad stuff, but what I know about Nicole, she is a lot of fun. Yeah. So tell us something that most people don't know about you. Oh, goodness. This is where I get like weirded out, Dorinda. What most people don't know about me is I just feel like people look at me and they see the outside, but when they begin to talk to me and they learn a little bit more about me, they're like, wow, I didn't know that. So I think it's more so about just keeping the perseverance and the resilience like at the forefront of your life. So like for me, the glass is always halfway full. I don't really like get sad and down about what I don't have. I got to think about what's coming around the corner. And so I think if people wanted to know more about me, it's just more about like just like the triumph. So the resilience and the perseverance and how you face adversity in life. That's just basically my story.
So one thing that we have in common is we have a powerful sister network, right? So we're surrounded by women who want to see one another thrive, and you know, and I value that. I value the fact that we met through that network, and having you now as a friend, and the peace that comes with that, and knowing that someone is going to have your back and inspire you.
Right.
So I encourage everyone to make sure that your network is reflective of where you want to be.
Right. And I would like to add to that, but people may not know about me, I'm a connector. So if there's opportunities where I see something in you that you may need, I may connect you to somebody who can help you out. I think that once you make it, when you realize it's not about you, ultimately, you know, you'll get your due. It'll come back around. So I think that people, when they go in and looking to kind of have what Michelle Thornton G would say, is your board of directors, your friend network, your squad, if you will. I think you really got to look for opportunities where you can lift each other up in different ways, and look for people who are really selfless. And it's not about, I need to kind of get the next like, or I got to get, you know, this sort of like, I got to hit these sort of goals and this money. If you see that, sometimes you got to turn away, I think, personally. And I think you got to lead the spirit by, let the spirit lead you, and it'll tell you. Because sometimes you just got to drop some of them off along the way and say, you know what, you had a reason and a season, and now it's time for you to go.
Yeah, and I'm a firm believer that some people are in your life for definitely a reason, but some only for a season. You know, it was eye-opening to me because I lost friends when I wrote the book.
Wow.
Well, people I thought were friends, and when I left corporate America, there's certain people who act like they don't know me no more.
Wow.
But it's so, you know, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. I'm fine with it, but because now I know who you are, and it doesn't bother me because I understand that some people are in your life for a reason and season.
Yep.
Yeah. And I just pray to God that He keeps me surrounded by the right people.
Yeah. I think cherish your friendships and really make sure that you also like give time to your friendship. Just don't make it about like a superficial, shallow thing.
Yeah.
It's really, really, I think, key and important. And as people begin to maneuver, I think I tell a lot of, I remember this very distinctly when I was coming up and was in college, and I think this is like me being my mature self, giving somebody advice, and I said to them, I said, choose your friends wisely. Because it's important, you know, and most of the friends that I have now have been my friends for 20 plus years, or, you know, almost 20 years. And I think that I can call each of them a friend, just like my family as well. Like I have friends in my family, because sometimes relatives are relatives, and some relatives can really just be your tight friends. And sometimes we're just not like that, but it's just, you really have to kind of discern who you want in your corner. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what do you do for fun?
For fun, well, I am trying to, I literally am looking into taking a sewing class. I know I sound real corny right now, but I always had a fascination for like how clothes are kind of like put together. And so I looked up this class and I'm going to take pretty soon, and hopefully, you know, I'll be having some garbs by Coco knows.
Do you follow Mimi G?
No.
I think she's Mimi G on Instagram. Well, she sews and does all of that, and she actually met her husband. She just recently got married because of their love of sewing and fashion.
Oh, cool.
So follow her because she puts her simplicity patterns up there, and she's just boss when it comes to fashion.
It's just something I always wanted to do. My grandmother used to do it, and it was a woman who used to make all my clothes when I was little. I would often think about like that is just something that I want to just explore. One of the other things I want to explore is sports related. I love if my knees were a little bit better, tennis, because I would take Serena. Okay.
Okay.
Or this new Coco, the young Coco coming from me. But you know, tennis is something I try to just stay like active. You know, just anything. And one of the other things that I want to do, I really want to do like a bike race or a bike tour. I like bikes, riding bikes. So
I just got into yoga, which I like. I like yoga. It's tough,
but you'll get strong.
But I know I'm going to get strong, but it's so relaxing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So
it releases the tension.
And going back to sewing, I think everybody is so close, like from the hood, right?
I know,
Or black
yeah.
families,
Listen,
like my grandmother and her sister.
yeah,
So
that's why I just want to find like some sort of like pastime, hobby, and that's one of them. So we'll see where we go with that.
All right, I'm gonna have to come to you with what you start, style me up.
Yes, hooking you up because I love clothes. So it's just a matter of like just like doing certain things that you may not see that you have a vision for, and it's just like if you have good fabric, why not, right?
Yeah.
So
one of the things that I'm learning as I get older, again, I'm 48, is I want to live life to the fullest. So anything that I want to do, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
Because life, tomorrow is not promised.
No, it's not. It's not. You just got to be deliberate.
Yeah, you got to be deliberate.
Yeah.
So I want to go to your career because you have a successful career and you made it to the leadership ranks. What are some career lessons that you would share with people who aspire to be in the leadership ranks?
I guess there are a couple, but I think what really pops out to me is just being confident in your abilities. So whatever you have, whatever skill that you have worked on, or it maybe not even fully be at its maturation rate whereby you feel confident to kind of like go from A to Z with it, just continue to work on a craft or work on that skill that you will want to develop. I think that that's important because I think a lot of times what I see from an HR standpoint, people have done, like if they're given a project and they do 3 projects, they think they want to be promoted and they want to kind of go on. No, but are you an expert in it? So I think become an expert in something and then kind of move to the next thing, or you could do it simultaneously. But I think that you really have to dig in and not, because people can find you out very easily. If you start talking and asking questions about the specific subject matter, and you will see like the person has a gaze over their eyes, to me that tells me that they are not well studied. So I think that really like just dig into whatever it is that you really want to do and go full throttle. I think if you want to show up, show up.
Yeah.
So that's one of my, that's advice that I would give someone. And I also would give someone advice to explore things outside of what you like to do, because I think it helps round out your experience as an individual. Because a lot of times if you're so linear and you can't have a conversation that can really like weave and bob and, navigate different areas that may not be as familiar to you, it shows that you might be a little bit green in certain areas. And I think that just rounding out your experience, reading different articles or different books from authors that you may not be aware of is a good thing as well.
I once had a mentor in corporate America tell me, never stay in the same position for more than 3 years because you'll become stagnant and people won't see you as being fresh and if you're below VP level. And that advice was good because I ended up in 3 different rotation programs, and I went to finance kicking and screaming because I'm like, y'all pay people for that. Why y'all sending me there?
Right.
And I thought I was going to fail, but it actually was the rotation where I found out truly who I was and what I was capable of, and really excelled there. So I agree with you. I would tell people to really explore different things so you can be well-rounded, as you said.
Yeah.
And it really, that helped propel me into, leadership.
Yeah. And just also to be bold.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid. Just be bold. Take a step. What you might be thinking, someone else is probably thinking as well. And if you have an idea, if it's rooted and if it's fact-based and it seems smart, why don't you serve it up? I mean, it's always good to get an audience of champions and advocates to listen to you. So hopefully you'll have some sort of relationships with senior level people who you can really just ideate with, or maybe grab coffee with and say, hey, I'm thinking about X, Y, and Z. Here are a couple of bullets. What do you think about that?
I love that you said that because that is what propelled me in my career. I wrote a proposal as to why the company should focus on women in multicultural markets because I had an idea. And so I think it's important because leaders look to support people who they know have ideas and who are innovative and who can help lead other people.
Right.
So it's important for you to share ideas. I once had another mentor tell me, Dorinda, you're too quiet in these meetings. If you're in this meeting, it's because you've earned that seat at the table.
Right.
So you better have a voice.
Right. Exactly. And formulate that point of view, but make sure it's concise. Like it's really well thought out. Because sometimes if you go and you're talking to a senior leader, they have limited time. So I always tell people, write it out. A couple of bullets, write it out, make sure it's succinct and it's smart and it's fact-based, and then you see where the conversation goes. A lot comes from that.
Yeah.
So, and I've seen a lot of people soar just by the fact of them just really stepping out of their comfort zone. So, yeah.
Where do you see Nicole 10 years from now?
Girl, if I don't see myself on Broadway with a one-woman show and all of my isms, but that's probably like where my heart really is. I probably really want to get back into like improv or something like that, because I feel like I'm a outward individual. So, and I have all of this energy still. So I just want to harness that into something that, you know, hopefully will be a project or just improv and telling stories or something along that line.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I'd be the first to buy a ticket.
Hey, that's the side. That's like a passion project. My what I'm focusing on now, aside from just doing my HR day to day, is I'm looking to be an executive coach, because I find a lot of people come to me for advice, and though it's been like all from the gut, I tend to steer people down the right path, and people say that it's something that it's a value add for them. So I'm looking to go to Columbia actually in the fall to get my executive coaching license. So that's on the docker.
Congratulations.
Yes. Got to be deliberate.
So we had Sarah Green on with Alfred Edmond Jr. last week. And I don't know if you know Sarah, Alfred's wife, but she is now in theater and acting and all that. In fact, they just released a trailer of a movie she's in.
Oh, very cool.
And so
I gotta convince myself. You know, I gotta tell myself I'm not too old. It's not too late. I still got talent. So you know.
Yeah, it's never too late.
Yeah.
I don't believe that age is a restriction for anything.
Yeah, it's like I gotta practice what I preach.
Yeah.
So I'm working on it.
Okay. Well, you have this beautiful tan. I'm like, what is going on?
Yes. You know, I try to make sure self-care is important.
Mm-hmm.
Self-care is important. But I love the sun, and I was just out by the pool this last couple of days. It's been really nice weather instead of all of the rain. So it's been fun. Yeah. I just like to be out in the sun and have fun, and you know, enjoy with my neighbors and whoever else comes along. So yeah.
Well, give us 3 lessons in the Nicole Martine Hall journey of life.
3 lessons. So I thought about this, and I think the 3 lessons that I will leave you with is definitely exercise your muscles in your resilience and your perseverance to overcome, because it's just a temporary space where you're in, and you know, there's always movement in life if you see the vision. I think number 2, surround yourself with people that will pour into you the goodness, but also then tell you the truth when you may not want to hear it. So I don't need yes ma'am people around me, or people just blowing smoke up my tail. No, we don't want that. And I think number 3 is whatever you do, have fun with it and do it in love. I think if you do it in love, something good comes out of it. So, you know, I'm trying to find my little balance now at this point in my life, and I try to do everything I do in love.
I love that.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's important to work always from a place of service where I'm giving back and helping someone, because I believe that, you know, God is truly, He's protected me throughout my life.
Yeah.
And, you know, I have an obligation to work to serve, to help other people.
Yeah.
So I love that, and something we have in common.
Yes. Sometimes, even though we don't want to admit it, because sometimes we get, I mean, I know me, sometimes I'm like, no, I don't want to do this, but I think about the end result and how I show up, and I got to show up the way I feel like I would want to be treated. So that's the end game.
Well, I love you for being on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This was awesome.
How can people follow you if they want to?
Well, I am not as active as I was in the beginning of the year, because I took a break from social media a little bit. But I'm at Coco Knows on Instagram, and for Facebook is Nicole Martine Hall, and for Twitter, which is _Coco Knows _. So
yeah, because we want to know where we're gonna find our improv show.
I know. I gotta do my one woman show one day. Yeah. It's coming, y'all. I got a lot of material.
So I want to thank you for being on the Protected by Purpose podcast. The goal of the podcast is to highlight people who've turned their trials into triumphs, their mess into a message, and have demonstrated success through courage, resiliency, perseverance, and their faith.
Oh,
Thank you for being on the show. And the show is sponsored by Newark Ironbound Film and Television Studios. And please be sure to follow the Newark International Film Festival, which is happening in September. Peace and blessings, and good night.
Good night.